Good morning, everybody. So it's lovely to be here. As Rosellen said, I co-founded and run Teenagers Translated with my colleague Nyla Grew. We would probably say that we specialise in up-to-date information on teenage development. So the material that we use, whether it's for staff inset training, for actually courses with teenagers as well, or for our parent courses, distills current research on brain science, relevant psychology and other disciplines, but it translates them into practical strategies for adults. So the aim of our training and our book is to help promote stability and resilience in children from around year 6. The period from age 10 to 24 is when the brain is doing its overhaul and rewiring itself for adulthood. It's a window of opportunity, but it's also a very vulnerable time when mental health issues can become established ways of coping with the emotional turbulence associated with life's pressures, failure, challenges, and growing up. So mental health symptoms like anxiety, stress, and depression are affecting younger and younger children. And once issues like self-harm, eating disorders, dependency, social withdrawal have become established, they are difficult to reverse without professional input. So important adults like parents and teachers can be a very positive and preventative influence on children at this time. And there's a few things that can really help us. Understanding what normal teenage behaviour is and what points to more worrying signals. For instance, children need to take risks, but safe risks. And some will suffer from uncertainty, but separation anxiety needs regulating. Also, to have the tools to engage and communicate with teenagers in a proactive way, thereby providing an environment that promotes good, settled behaviour and minimises and doesn't escalate problematic behaviour. So much of this teenage turbulence that we see is a result of the changes going on in their brains. So understanding what is happening and why, for instance, knowing it's their underlying emotional state that's driving those problem behaviours, and that patterns and habits get established, we can help focus our firepower where it's most needed, like supporting them to regulate strong emotions, build stress resilience, and provide a secure, safe launch pad for life. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fiona. I'm the Clinical Director of Place to Be. That was an excellent introduction, so I don't have to say any of that. I agree with everything. We're the UK's largest mental health charity in schools, and we set up projects in schools which include school project managers and counsellors who work with children and families and teachers to support mental health across the community. We are in over 250 schools. We've been around for over 21 years now. Traditionally, we were in primary schools, but more recently we've moved into, probably in the last 7 or 8 years, moved into secondary schools. We're also in the independent sector more recently. So perhaps it'll be helpful if I tell you a little bit about how we support schools with mental health. And we're a drop in the ocean. We're the largest, but we're a drop in the ocean compared to how many schools there actually are across the UK. So when a school takes us on as a service, we either go into the school for 1.5 days up to 5 days. We have a school project manager who's an experienced qualified therapist, and they are in there to run the whole project. That includes liaising with teachers, liaising with parents, carers, and the children and young people. We also have volunteer counsellors who go into the school and do the one-to-one work. So if you wanted to be a volunteer counsellor with Place to Be, you have to be at a certain stage of your training to apply to be a volunteer. We're pretty stringent about who we take on and put in schools, obviously. We do think that a whole school mental health, rather than someone just coming in and dealing with 5 or 6 children or young people is the way to go. So what I mean by whole school mental health is that we would encourage everybody from the head teacher down to be aware and to interact around mental health. And this includes things like talking in assemblies. So our school project managers might give a talk on what is mental health versus what is challenges to mental health or mental ill health. It includes work in classrooms with teachers, it includes one-to-one work, group work, and probably our most popular service, and I think this is what sets us apart, and I would encourage schools to look at doing something around this with a qualified counsellor, is our drop-in service. So I think one of the main things about mental health is actually encouraging people to acknowledge when they need help. So the drop-in service means that children and young people can refer themselves. They can either fill in a slip and ask for a 15-minute slot, or they can turn up and ask to see the counsellor. In primary schools, we run that drop-in service in lunchtimes. In secondaries, increasingly preschool, before school and after school, because you would know that adolescents are very social, so they don't particularly want to spend their lunch break going to see somebody, and they certainly don't want to advertise it either. So that drop-in service is very popular. Increasingly, we're having to look at how we actually engage with young people, because the primary school environment is incredibly different to the secondary environment. So increasingly we're looking at online technologies so that young people can use email or their phones to make an appointment. We're looking at developing an app so they can also make an appointment and also give us feedback on our service. So we're also in part of a pilot which is using an avatar-based system. You know, often young people, it's quite challenging for them to look somebody in the eye and talk about issues. It's challenging for adults as well sometimes. So using an avatar-based program means that the counsellor and the young person look at the screen and work through the avatar. So we're having to really think outside the box and meet adolescents where they are, and increasingly primary school children as well. So our one-to-one work, you can refer yourself through the drop-in service, or you can be referred by a teacher or by a parent. And obviously the referring yourself is more likely to happen in secondary, but it does also happen in primary. We meet with parents to try and get a sense of what's the background, the family development, what might have led to challenges the child or young person is having. Sometimes young people don't want us to meet with their parents, and that is also something that we have to consider. Consent becomes quite an interesting subject once you get up into secondary, and even children have the right to ask for confidentiality. So this leads me probably to one of our biggest issues in schools, obviously, is around safeguarding in our projects, because when you're dealing with mental health, you're often hearing disclosures of trauma or issues that young people are facing which need us to respond more than just with the young person. So we always have limits to confidentiality. We tell children and young people that anything they tell us is confidential unless we have concerns about their safety or the safety of someone around them, in which case we would have to work with somebody in the school. We do work within the team, within the school team, usually led by the inclusions manager or the special education needs coordinator or the child protection officer. So ideally we work within that team, and any concerns we have about the safety of children and or their mental health, we'd work through the school team. We also work closely with Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service to refer in when we have concerns. I must be running out of time. Yes? I'll stop there because I could go on for ages, and I'm sure there'll be questions.
I'm sure there will be too. Is this now working, Jessica? Yes, it is. Rafe, do you want to say anything particular about this, or can we just ask you for your advice as and when it becomes appropriate?
The question I wanted to ask, Rosamund, is there are quite a lot of mental health issues that frighten parents of other children. Things like anorexia and depression and self-harm are perceived to be infectious, and also the rules about confidentiality seem to inhibit schools from bringing parents of friends and the friends themselves into conversations about how to help a pupil within school, and that often seems to lead to isolation and rejection and opposition from parents. What experience have you got of making that work well?
Yeah, good question, of which there is no easy answer. It is a very, sometimes you're walking a tightrope because you don't want to lose the young person, but there's a safety issue. Interestingly enough, I was just reading a study recently where they did a meta-analysis around self-harm in the States and what actually works for young people. And actually, the most successful support for young people is peers. So their peers, and we know that anyway, they're likely to turn to their peers when they're adolescents. I mean, it is a tricky one because you have to walk the line between giving them their independence and also supporting them with their health. This is why we work in teams. We wouldn't make decisions on our own, especially if we are working in a school. The child protection officer, whoever's in charge of that sort of side of the school, we would work closely with them. We would encourage the young person to talk to their parents. We would invite them to bring their parents in. We would try and find a way that works for them so that they start to get a support around them. One thing I would say to parents is don't bury your head in the sand. Find out about things like self-harm and like eating disorders, because they actually are they're coping strategies. The ways young people cope with stress in their lives and how we work with that in therapy, as I'm sure you find as well, is that we recognize their coping strategies, but we help them find other ways to cope that aren't as dangerous. Sometimes you have to actually step beyond the confidentiality and say, actually, this needs referral into child and adolescent mental health services. We need to bring a GP in here. Every situation is very unique, but primary, obviously, is the safety of the child and young person.
Okay. And I think I would probably add to that, yes, that where we can provide information to parents, to parents in school, but also to teenagers as well. When we do run our programs with teenagers, we help them to understand, as Fiona says, about their emotions, that they will feel stressed about things, that they need to develop their own set of coping strategies, healthy coping strategies, because self-harm and eating and withdrawal to the internet and so forth are unhealthy coping strategies that fuel, as you say, the withdrawal, and it's the withdrawal that then fuels the anxiety, which then fuels the need to use that strategy again. I mean, I would hope that it's that we are very slowly reducing the stigmas attached to mental health issues, and it's not something that's a sort of talk behind the hand situation. That actually, if something is going on in perhaps one of your children's class, that actually it should be possible for you to go to the school and say, could perhaps the year 6, 7 and 8 parents have a talk on self-harm or on eating disorders, and rather than pinpointing, that's the problem child, but just to say, we want to know about it so that we can support our child who's in that environment. Because we often come across, I'm sure Fiona's the same, children as young as 11 or 12 who are supporting their friend who's self-harming. Now, they don't have the tools to do that, and so it's important that parents are there to act as a support and a safety net for everybody, and we can do that through giving them the information as to how to offer that support.
So has anybody here got a question for either of our main speakers or for Ralph?
Focused on areas such as self-harm and eating disorder, but taking a very pragmatic view of things like anxiety and stress. At what point does a parent know when to intervene, when to look for mental health, or whether it's just something that's going on with the rewiring of
and where those things, where those issues, as a parent, you're starting to feel, your gut senses, I think this is a problem. Parents know best, and so it's for them, I suppose, to not jump in too soon, but to monitor and to watch, and then to ask the child. You know, I've noticed that for the last couple of weeks. You seem quite anxious. You know, can I help in any way? Would you like to talk about it? And sort of open up the door to it. But I think it's monitoring, assessing, watching, and if it persists for longer than you feel comfortable, then that would be a sign either to approach or to seek some sort of professional help, but with the child's blessing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's a bell curve on stress. On the one hand, we're talking about resilience, and to develop resilience, you actually have to experience a certain amount of stress. So we call this eustress as you're going up. It's good stress, you know, learning at the last minute for an exam, but there's a point where you can tip over, and I agree, it's important for parents to recognise that, but increasingly the onus is on teachers as well. And there are organisations such as Mental Health First Aid UK who go into schools and can do anything from 2 hours to 2 days training, which gives the staff an understanding of anxiety, stress, depression, and what signs to watch out for. Not only the externalising behaviours, but the internalising withdrawal type behaviours. They also can train a school mental health champion, which is to a higher level. That's, I think, more of a Department of Education initiative at the moment. There are fantastic resources online, such as MindEd, which is a free resource available to anybody. There is the NHS Choices site, there is Young Minds, there are fantastic information providing sites where you can learn what to watch out for. But I absolutely agree, if you notice, it's looking for the changes and also understanding development, because there will be changes in development anyway.
There are certain risk factors as well associated with the onset of mental health issues. So it's, you know, it's worth also for parents and for staff, as Fiona says, to have some staff inset training, for parents to have access to information as well. What are those kind of risk factors? Because, you know, certain things, certain traumas, changes at home, illness, bereavement, all those sort of things. If there are a couple of different risk factors together, that might, if that child has a genetic predisposition towards being vulnerable or anxious, might trigger that. So it's worth also looking at the environment and what that child's been experiencing to assess, well, whether, is this okay that they're feeling this way, or, you know, do they need some extra support?
Can I just ask very quickly, Fiona, are there the links to the websites you mentioned of the place to be one?
Yes, I think some of them are there, but I particularly recommend the minded.gov.uk. I think that's the right address. And you just do a search for anxiety, depression, self-harm. It's really good. But yes, we do have some links on our...
So, who's got the next question? Why not that lady in front of
What would you say are the root causes behind the increase in mental health disorders among young people?
Yes, we get asked that a lot. And recently I was at a function where you had a whole lot of esteemed researchers around mental health saying, and one stood up and said, well, life isn't any more stressful for adolescents now than it was 20 years ago. I beg to differ. I think it's a lot more stressful. You know, there are the normal sort of daily stressors they deal with, but there's a lot more stress on them, for example, to get the right results, get into the right school, get into the right university. And I think that what they also live with is increased stress from their parents, I think. So that would be one thing. I think that there's a lot more stress that they're dealing with. I do think part of it might be, although I couldn't give you a percentage of what it is, it's just our observation, is that we are far more knowledgeable about mental health. So perhaps we are more alert and we refer a lot more young people and we're helping a lot more. So I would say those would be the two main things for me. It's a lot more stressful and there's a lot more awareness.
What anxiety is the stress response. It's the fight, flight, freeze response, and not being able to, you know, to be able to manage that. there are things that are interfering with normal adolescent development. You know, socialising is something that teenagers need to do, and social media is interfering with the face-to-face, the real proper socialising, so developing those communication skills that they need to do. And they're spending a lot of time on their own, and that's not good for, you know, for teenage development. So that would also be something else I would say definitely more stressful today. I would agree.
Right. Next, the lady in the red cardigan, Rachel.
Hello, good morning. My name is Olivia Raw. I'm a child and adolescent psychotherapist, and I deal with a lot of these issues. But one of the key things that I wonder how at schools we could address before they even reach a psychotherapist are how could schools address the issues of sleep? I see a lot of children who sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. The other issue is the family, time with parents. I've worked with hundreds of children. They've never said, so a common theme is not having family time, not having meals together. So how do you think at schools we could address that to help them before they even come to the therapist?
Well, when we get into schools and when we are able to do a resilience programme with young people, we will look in great depth at all the different healthy coping strategies. What are the ways, what are the sorts of things that cause you anxiety and stress, and to understand what those things are, and what are the ways that you can start to take responsibility and self-govern, self-police yourself on the things that do cause you stress. Teenagers need 9 hours sleep a night, 9 hours uninterrupted sleep. So to help them by saying, put your phone or your device outside your bedroom door before you go to sleep, because the blue light interferes with melatonin, that interferes with your mood. But teenagers need to young people need to buy into that. Same thing with the parents. If we go into schools and we are asked to do a talk on helping your teenager manage stress, an hour and a half talk, we will go through all those different things, meal times, routines, rituals, all the sort of talking face-to-face, phones down, simple things that we all sort of know, but when you put them all together with exercise and music and downtime, no computers before bed, it becomes a sort of package that parents can start to see that this has a holistic effect on the mood of their child.